It all started when I moved into my dream home, a peaceful, well-maintained property just outside the jurisdiction of an overbearing homeowners association. The house was perfect, with a spacious yard, a stunning view of the nearby hills, and most importantly, a long private driveway that provided ample parking space. I had checked and double-checked before buying the place. This driveway was entirely on my property, not an easement, not shared, and certainly not community property. At first, things were great. I met a few of my neighbors, and while some were friendly, others were suspiciously nosy, constantly peeking over their fences as if I were a foreign invader in their precious suburban utopia. But I didn't mind. I wasn't there to make best friends. I just wanted to enjoy my home in peace. That peace was short-lived, though, because it didn't take long for me to meet her. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Even though my home wasn't under the HOA's control, she acted like she owned the entire neighborhood. And for some reason, she had decided that my driveway, yes, my clearly marked, privately owned driveway, was a public access road. It started small. A car here, a car there. A random minivan parked at the end of my driveway overnight. At first, I thought maybe someone had made a mistake. Maybe a visitor got lost and assumed my driveway was a convenient parking spot. But then I started noticing a pattern. Whenever the HOA had an event, my driveway turned into a full-blown parking lot. It wasn't just guests either. Residents, even Karen herself, started using it as if it were a designated community space. My patience was tested the day I found a complete stranger unloading groceries from their trunk, blocking my garage in the process. I walked out, politely pointed out that this was private property, and asked them to move. They looked at me as if I had just told them the sky was green. Oh, Karen said we could use it. She said it's part of the neighborhood. My blood boiled, but I kept my composure. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Karen had misspoken. I decided to take it up with her directly. So I marched over to her house, rang the doorbell, and waited. When she finally opened the door, she had that signature AOA smugness about her, the kind that said, "I make the rules around here." "Hi, Karen," I began, keeping my voice as level as possible. "I noticed people have been parking in my driveway. I just wanted to clarify, it's private property. I'd appreciate it if you could let the neighbors know it's not for public use." She gave me a wide, condescending smile. "Oh, I know it's technically yours, but let's be realistic here. We have limited parking, and you have so much space. It's just common courtesy to share." Common courtesy? This wasn't a shared driveway, a communal park, or a public street. It was my land. I reiterated my stance, firmly but politely, only for Karen to wave a dismissive hand. "It's just for convenience," she said, as if I was the unreasonable one. Besides, the HOA has always used that space. It's part of our neighborhood's history. I was a part of the HOA, and this wasn't some ancient landmark. It was my property, and her entitled attitude was already grating on my nerves. "Look," I said, my patience thinning. "I don't want to be difficult, but I want to have to start towing cars if this keeps happening." Her eyes widened in exaggerated shock. "Oh, come on, don't be that neighbor. It's just parking. It's not like we're hurting anything." That was where she was wrong. It was hurting something: my patience, my property rights, and my ability to use my own space without hassle. But Karen wasn't done yet. She crossed her arms and gave me an infuriating smirk. "We'll see about that," she said before shutting the door in my face. I walked back home, fully expecting her to spread some exaggerated version of our conversation to the rest of the HOA. And surprise, surprise, things only got worse. I had hoped that my confrontation with Karen would put an end to the issue, but I underestimated just how stubborn and entitled she was. Instead of respecting my property, she took my firm stance as a personal challenge. Within days, the situation escalated in ways I hadn't even imagined. It started with passive-aggressive nonsense. Flyers from the HOA began mysteriously appearing in my mailbox, despite the fact that I wasn't a member. Community guidelines, they read, with vague references to keeping our streets accessible to all residents. Then came the letters, and signed, of course, lecturing me about being a team player and understanding that this neighborhood functions as a collective. It was laughable. They wanted me to believe that my property was some kind of shared resource, even though I had the legal documents to prove otherwise. But the real kicker came when Karen decided to take things further. One afternoon, I came home to find a brand new sign planted at the edge of my driveway. Community parking, no reserved spots. My jaw nearly hit the ground. This wasn't just an assumption or a misunderstanding. This was outright theft. Karen had taken it upon herself to publicly declare my driveway as community property. Furious, I marched over to her house and knocked on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. She opened it with a sickly sweet smile, as if she had been expecting me. "Oh, hello. I figured you'd stop by." She gestured to the sign like she had just gifted me a brand new car. "Isn't it great? We had it made to clear up any confusion. Now everyone knows they can use the space." My fists clenched at my sides. "Karen, this is illegal. This is my property." She sighed, tilting her head like I was some clueless child. "Listen, I understand you're new here, but we've always used that space. The HOA board agrees. I'm not part of the HOA. I snapped. "And this isn't their decision to make." Her expression barely flickered. "It's not just about the HOA. It's about what's best for everyone. We had a vote." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "A vote? You can't vote on my property." "Well," she said with a shrug, "we did. That was it." I turned on my heel and yanked the sign right out of the ground. Karen gasped as if I had just committed a federal crime. "You can't do that. That's vandalism." "No," I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Vandalism would be me spray painting Karen's a thief on your garage. This is me taking back my property." I threw the sign into my garage and slammed the door. I had made myself clear, or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up to an even bigger issue. Five cars were parked in my driveway. Not just at the edges, but directly in front of my garage, blocking me in completely. My blood boiled as I stormed outside, only to be met with Karen and a few other HOA members standing across the street, watching smugly. "Problem," she called out. "Move your cars," I yelled. One of the men beside her chuckled. "Oh, we just needed a little extra space today. We figured you wouldn't mind, since the driveway is part of the neighborhood now." That was the last straw. I called a tow company immediately. Within 30 minutes, a large tow truck rumbled up my street, and I pointed them directly to the cars. The first one was hitched up in minutes, and suddenly, Karen wasn't so smug anymore. She ran up, arms flailing. "You can't do this." "I can," I shot back. "And I am." The other car owners started rushing outside, panic setting in as the second car was lifted. They screamed, threatened, but I stood my ground. "This is my property," I reminded them. "If I see another car here, it'll be towed. No warnings. No exceptions." Karen seethed, face turning an impressive shade of red, but she couldn't do anything. She had lost this round, but I knew she wasn't done yet. I knew Karen wouldn't back down easily, but I didn't expect her to take things to an entirely new level of insanity. The day after I had the cars towed, I noticed something strange. Karen and a few other HOA members were huddled on the sidewalk near my driveway, whispering and occasionally glancing in my direction. I had a sinking feeling that they were up to something, but I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, just as I was settling in for a quiet night, I heard loud voices outside. I walked to the window and nearly dropped my drink. Karen had organized a full-blown neighborhood protest in front of my house. Signs, chants, even a damn megaphone. "Share the space. Share the space," they shouted in unison, as if this were some great civil rights movement instead of a group of entitled suburbanites throwing a tantrum over a driveway. I stepped outside, arms crossed, surveying the absurd scene. Karen stood front and center, practically glowing with self-righteousness. "We, the community, are demanding that you stop your selfish behavior and allow fair access to this space," she announced through the megaphone. "This driveway has been used by residents for years, and you do not have the right to take that away from us." I raised an eyebrow. "Except, I do have that right, because it's my property." "Not anymore," she barked. "The HOA board has ruled that this driveway is now community property." "The HOA board?" I laughed. "I'm not part of the HOA, remember?" "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "We've made a unanimous decision." I blinked at her, stunned by the sheer audacity of that statement. "Karen, you can't just vote to steal someone's land. That's not how reality works." "Oh, we'll see about that," she sneered. "We've already filed a petition with the county to have this driveway designated as an access road." My stomach dropped for half a second before logic kicked back in. That was a bluff. It had to be. There was no way a group of HOA members could just declare someone else's property public. Still, the fact that they were going this far meant it was time for me to escalate too. I didn't bother arguing. I just smirked and walked back inside. If they wanted to play dirty, I was about to show them just how badly they had underestimated me. The next morning, I paid a visit to my lawyer. He listened, eyebrows climbing higher and higher as I recounted the entire mess. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. They really think they can just take your property? I nodded. Karen sure does. He leaned back, considering. All right, first thing we're going to do is slap them with a cease and desist. That should shut them up fast. But just in case, let's get ahead of this. I'll file paperwork with the county to reinforce your property lines legally. They won't have a leg to stand on. I left his office feeling very satisfied. Within days, the cease and desist letters were delivered to Karen and every member of her little HOA squad. But Karen being Karen wasn't done yet. She decided to double down. I came home one evening to find brand new lines painted on my driveway, dividing it into parking spaces. Not only that, but a metal sign had been drilled directly into the pavement, reading, "Permitted parking, residents only." That was it. That was the moment I decided Karen was about to learn the hard way. I called the police. When the officer arrived, I explained everything, the unauthorized signs, the harassment, the illegal use of my property. He shook his head in disbelief. "And you have proof this is your driveway?" "Absolutely." I pulled out my property deed, complete with marked boundaries. The officer nodded. "All right, let's go have a chat." We walked up to Karen's house, and she opened the door with a smirk. "Oh, officer, I'm so glad you're here. This man has been very disruptive to our community." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "are you aware that you have illegally installed signs and markings on private property?" Her smirk faltered. "Excuse me? This driveway is not community property," he continued, his voice firm. "And by drilling into his pavement, you've committed property damage. That's a serious offense." Karen sputtered. But we voted. You can't vote away someone's property rights, ma'am." His voice turned steely. "I'm going to need you to remove those signs immediately. And if I get another complaint about unauthorized parking, I'll start issuing citations for trespassing." I watched, arms folded, as Karen's face twisted into rage and disbelief. She opened her mouth, probably to argue, but the officer cut her off with a pointed look. "Or would you prefer we settle this in court?" That shut her up real fast. Over the next few days, the aftermath unfolded beautifully. The signs were removed. The paint was scrubbed off my driveway. Karen was forced to send out an HOA-wide email admitting that my driveway was not public property. But the best part? The county sent me confirmation that my property rights were legally reinforced, meaning if Karen or her minions ever tried this nonsense again, they'd be in for a world of legal trouble. But the real cherry on top came a month later. It turned out my lawyer had also looked into the HOA's records and discovered that Karen had been misusing funds for years. That little petition she claimed to have filed? Fake. But you know what was real? The misallocated HOA money she had spent on those illegal signs. Once that came to light, she was removed from the HOA board, fined thousands of dollars, and forced to move out of the neighborhood altogether. As for my driveway, well, it's still mine, and no one dares park on it anymore.